Okay, so my topic is child abuse and child protective services. There is a lot of controversy in the United States about child protective services. When a child dies in the hands of child protective services, everyone starts to ask, how could this happen? Were they not doing their jobs right? But there are so many legal things that can lead to a child's death. It can be that the parents were showing signs that they were taking care of the child better, but nobody really knows what happens to a child behind their closed doors. There are a lot of different kinds of child abuse. Child abuse can come or can be physical, emotional, and psychological. The reason why I chose this topic was because there was a huge controversy about the Gabriel Fernandez case. People always show concerns when a child dies and jump to many conclusions and start to blame the parents, the social workers, and sometimes even the child. The main point about my topic is to explain what happens during these type of cases. Social workers a lot of the times tend to have many different cases on their plate, and it is easy for a mistake to happen. They face challenges in the workforce just like anybody with a job. They tend to have a more fragile job because they deal with children and families, and their job is to keep everybody safe and happy. Being a social worker must be a handy job because not only do they sit in their offices and look through casework, they go to many different homes as well. Mistakes are common in the industry, but when there are various red flags, that is when something needs to be done and not avoided. At first, when I started doing my research about this topic, I started to think that social workers have many cases on their hands and they can't get a grip on every single one. But there are levels that kids are classified in. And the high-risk kids should come to a social worker's attention first since they are on the borderline. There is a lot of corruption in the child protection industry to where social workers might not do their jobs, or they just maybe are having like a rough day and don't really pay much attention to their cases. But whenever that happens, mistakes like that happens, it can result into a child's death. A specific case about my topic would be the Gabriel Fernandez case. This little boy died on May 24, 2013 in the hands of Child Protective Services. Gabriel showed many signs of child neglect. He would go to school with bruises, with black eyes, his fingers would burn, his head would be burned, like cigarette burns, and nobody really took action besides the teacher. The teacher would call his social worker, and his social worker would say that the case was already under control. But the social worker, whenever she would make visits to the home, she would not ask to see the little boy. Therefore, the mom would say, "Oh no, he's fine. He's just playing with his brother." The social worker wouldn't really ask to see the little boy and see what condition he was in. First heard about this case, I had a lot of questions about it because a lot of people started blaming CPS and social workers, and I thought, how could they blame them when they're always doing their job and they should always be doing their job since it's like regarding little kids? I did change my stance and my opinion on leaning towards the social worker's side because when I started getting into this case and I started doing my research, it stated that there were a lot of red flags in this case. Like, as you can see, this little boy, his picture was taken at school looking like this and nobody kind of had concerns about it. I thought that I read that the social workers weren't doing their jobs correctly. They didn't ask to see the child whenever they would do home visits. They kind of took the mom's word for it and not really take action. After doing my research on this project, I've learned that child abuse does happen quite frequently than expected. Social workers have to take a lot of precautions because they're dealing with vulnerable kids. After doing my research on this, it kind of makes me wonder how many kids have died under the Child Protective Services hands. In the Gabriel Fernandez case, I feel like this case was brought to light because of how many red flags this boy showed and nobody took action. Doing my research on this topic really did change my perspective on everything. Since I was never a victim of anything like this, it really did help me open my eyes a little bit and think about those kids who go through their parents neglecting them or some kind of abuse, and that kind of opens my eyes to like how it kind of gives me a better understanding on how foster care works and stuff like that. My presentation can be a message to future social workers and to not take their jobs really easy because they have children in their hands and their responsibility is to protect these children. And if there is abuse in the home, it's their responsibility to take these kids out of the home. During the Gabriel Fernandez case, there were about 4 social workers who were fired from their jobs because and even tried in court because they did not do their jobs right, and a kid did pass away in their hands. And this concludes my project.